I know there's nothing to worry about, so why am I still reacting like this? You know the presentation isn't dangerous. You know the spider isn't going to jump off the wall and kill you. You know that getting on a plane does not automatically mean that something terrible is going to happen. You know you're capable. You know, and yet your heart still starts racing, your stomach still turns over, your mind still goes blank. Or you get that overwhelming feeling of just wanting to get away, to leave. So you already know that you're okay. Why doesn't knowing change how you feel? That's what I want to explore in this video, because it also helps explain where hypnosis can fit in with creating change. You already know one of the things I often find when working with people is that they don't need more information. They already understand their problem very well. Someone who's someone who's anxious about public speaking doesn't usually need me to tell them you're not actually in danger. You know, when you're on that stage, you'll be fine. They already know that. Someone who's scared of flying knows that millions of people fly safely every day. Someone who's scared of spider, a tiny dust-sized spider isn't going to cause them a problem. You see, the problem is not necessarily what you consciously know, it's what automatically happens. And there's an important distinction between the two. Think about tying your shoelaces. Think about tying your shoelaces, or something as simple as tying your shoelaces. When you first learned, you had to concentrate really hard which lace goes where, and I think it was like make the bunny's ear, round the bend, through the loop, whatever, pull this bit through there. Like, it took conscious effort, but now you probably don't think about it at all. Like, you just do it. And in fact, if you were to try and think about it the next time you do it, you won't be able to do it. And this is because your brain has learned the pattern so well that the behavior has just become automatic, so that you don't have to think about it. And while all emotional responses are obviously, they're way more complicated than tying shoelaces, but the principle gives us a useful way of thinking about our reactions. Our brain learns patterns. Something happens and then a response follows. And the more established that pattern becomes, the more times we do it, the more automatic it will become. So where do these responses come from? Well, let's use a really simple example. So imagine that a baby sees a spider, and at first they have absolutely no idea that they're supposed to be frightened of it, but they notice it, they see it whizzing across the floorboards. And then mom or dad, or a caregiver, somebody who is influential over that baby, runs in the room, sees a spider, starts screaming and panicking and shouting, and they kill the spider. Imagine that happening a few times in front of that baby. Sometimes it can just take that one time, but imagine that response from the adults around a baby happening every time there's a spider on the scene. We know what's going to happen with that baby. We know that when they're a fully grown adult, they're going to have a meltdown because there's a spider in the bathroom. Potentially. Potentially, that young baby is going to grow up to have a fear of spiders. And of course, I'm generalizing and I'm simplifying this enormously. I'm not suggesting that every phobia comes from watching a parent, because, well, they simply don't. Our responses can develop through all sorts of experiences, through associations and learning. But the point is, our brains learn. They learn. And some things they learned a long time ago still contribute to the way that we respond today. And sometimes those responses are outdated. And when the response happens before the logic, well, that's why you can find yourself in a situation consciously you're thinking, oh, this is ridiculous. Like, I know I'm okay. Why am I going on like this? And you can think that it's silly and I shouldn't be behaving like this all day long, but your body is still going to take over every single time in that moment. It's when you notice your heart racing, your skin changing a different colour, your breathing, your muscles tightening, the thoughts speeding up, or the words won't come out your mouth, or they do, but they're just like a blur. And we often make it worse by becoming frustrated with ourselves. Why am I doing this? I know there's nothing wrong, but why can't I just stop it? I just don't want to do that anymore. I just want to stop it. But really, that's the interesting bit, because you're not consciously sitting there choosing the response. If you were, you'd simply choose something else, right? So try this. So rather than immediately fighting the response, rather than immediately trying to, I don't want to be like this, I don't want to feel like this, just become curious about it. Just sit with it. Just see where it takes you. Just notice it. Notice the response happening. Notice the thoughts. Notice your breathing. Just observe it. Just become that observer in that moment. What was it that changed first in your body? What were those things that you started saying to yourself? What then happened next? And each time you're beginning to notice the trigger, the response, and the behavior. And you don't necessarily begin or have to analyze your entire childhood to do this. Sometimes by just simply becoming curious how you're doing a response, observing yourself, can tell you a lot about yourself. So where does hypnosis fit into this? Well, this brings us into hypnosis, because when I'm working with somebody, I'm often not trying to teach them something that they don't already know. I'm interested in the response that is actually happening. What happens inside of you when you imagine giving that presentation? What happens when you think about getting on that plane? What happens when you walk into a meeting? How do you know you're panicking? What's it like? And what would happen if your mind and body began to respond differently? What would happen then? And hypnosis gives us a way of exploring and working with those patterns without having to consciously analyze and deal with every detail. And most importantly, I'm not going into your brain and deleting things. I'm not wiping memories or experiences. I'm not taking control of your mind. I'm creating an environment where you can become absorbed in your own internal experience, explore those responses, and begin discovering different ways of responding. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, is that sometimes you don't need to know more. And we like to think, especially if we're anxious about something, we like to think, I just need to know everything and then I'll be okay. We don't need to know more, because you already know. The question becomes, what does your mind and body do automatically? And is that response still useful for you now? Because something being automatic doesn't necessarily mean it has to stay that way. And that's one of the reasons why I find hypnosis pretty fascinating, because we can change those automatic responses in such a rapid, discreet, and intentional way. So have a think about this for yourself. What's one reaction you know where logically you know you're okay, but your mind and body still responds differently? And you don't even need to change it right now. It's just about noticing it. It's just about becoming curious about it. Because noticing how you do something can be the beginning of the discovery of how you can actually do it differently. And if you want to understand more about hypnosis, automatic responses, and how I use this with clients, then simply just subscribe to this channel, because I'll be sharing much more of what happens both inside and outside the hypnosis room. I'm Amy Cinnamon. Thank you for watching.